Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regularly scheduled Board of Directors meeting from Ren Water on Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. Terry, if I have a roll call, please.
Yes, good evening. Vice President Jed Smith.
Here.
Director Ranjiv Kush.
Here.
Director Diana Mayer.
Here.
Director Larry Russell.
Here.
And President Matt Sampson.
Here. I'd like to go ahead and ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Terry, roll call.
Vice President Smith.
Aye.
Director Kush.
Aye.
Director Mayer.
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
And President Sampson.
Yes.
There were no comments on that.
And before moving to the closed session, do we have any public comments on the closed session tonight?
There are none.
Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting to closed session.
Thank you.
Great. We've reconvened from closed session with no reportable action, and they'll move on to item number 5. Terry, public comments on non-agenda matters.
Yes, I have Phil Sauter and Larry Minikis, please.
Good evening. Apologies if I missed this in another meeting or somewhere on the website, but I don't recall seeing a recent analysis of last year's rate increases, along with dropping the summer watering discount. It was an assumption going in that moving more folks into a higher Tier 4 rate would have a positive effect on conservation, especially during the summer months when some users see large spikes in outdoor use of potable water. If this information isn't already being tracked and made available for public review, I'd like to ask that we get to see it soon. And before we spend a lot more time analyzing water supply options, it would be nice to know if even a handful of heavy users have modified their water use because of the rate decisions that have been made, but not yet measured. I won't be able to attend this Thursday's Finance Committee meeting, but I did look ahead to the presentations and saw that water sales for the first 6 months of the year are right at budget, but the January sales were down 20% below budget and 10% below last January. Without information on sales by tier, we can probably assume that January's sales have nothing to do with reduction in outdoor water use, but it wouldn't be hard to find out where the shortfall is coming from. I'd like to request that not only for the board's information, but for the public's as well, we start getting regular insights into the way water is used by various customer segments. That will help us make better decisions on finances, the need for future rate adjustments, opportunities for targeted demand reduction, reliability of water supply, phasing of the AMI rollout, and evaluation of projects and capital investments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Larry Minikis, please.
Good evening, folks. I want to address the recent letters published in the IJ criticizing MMW's approach to water supply. And while I appreciate the public's engagement, I find them factually inaccurate in several ways. It appears that these perspectives rely primarily on media coverage rather than a deeper understanding of the district's ongoing efforts. I'd like to encourage interested parties to closely follow the agenda packets and presentations, along with recordings of past meetings as time will allow for them. The reality is that MMWD has been methodically evaluating multiple options to enhance long-term water resilience, including regional partnerships, storage solutions, conservation incentives, and as we are focusing on this evening, pipeline infrastructure. I recognize that engaging the public in these discussions is difficult, and that's part of the challenge that MMWD faces, not just doing the right work, but making sure that the public understands it. The perception that nothing, quote unquote, nothing of substance has been done is simply inaccurate. But if that's what the public believes, difficult it can be, perhaps it means that the district must do more to clearly communicate its approach. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more speaker. Miss Marilyn Price, please.
Yeah, hi. Well, and I may be presenting a wild idea. I just had it on my bike ride. It's the only place I have time to think about things. It just came across my mind, maybe one of the problems we have with getting people involved in conservation is, everybody screams about the bills going up, but I don't know that they know what their bills might be. I'm wondering if any water districts do polls that in simple terms, I have a hard time understanding all the complexities you all get into, or most of the complexities you get into. But if in simple terms, people understood where we are, what particularly for them, the water rates might be if we don't do something about it, giving them the options and with a heavy dose of how conservation could help. And I'm mentioning this because maybe something like that with a poll that's done scientifically can give us some clue onto how what people would do in terms of conservation if they knew what their rates will be, and a little bit more about why they need to conserve. So that was my wild thought today.
Thank you, Ms. Price. There are no further speakers.
Great, thank you. Move on to item number 6, directors and general managers announcements. Ben.
None this evening.
Great, thank you. Director Mayor.
None for me, thanks.
All good, thank you. Director Russell.
Yeah, well, only one. It's nice to be in the summertime in South Africa.
Great. I have just a few. One, Paul, I want to say thank you. I was unable to attend the planning meeting, the initial planning meeting last week, or 2 weeks ago. But I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to put together the drought options. Should we incorporate another, come into contact with another drought? It was very helpful to understand those numbers and understand how limited our options are, and really reinforce the fact that we don't want to be anywhere near all of that. And then if you could pass along to Alicia too, her effort to take the Lagunitas TAC out for a site visit for the Nicasio Dam spillway raise, much appreciated to engage the public with that. So thank you very much. Next up, we'll go to board and committee reports. Director Russell.
Thank you. On Thursday, February 13th, the newly named Planning Commission committee held a meeting. Staff provided an overview of the San Geronimo Treatment Plant roof replacement project. It's a long overdue project that will alleviate the need for plastic buckets in the operations area. The committee referred the item to the board to consider approving the contract award for the project at a future meeting. It's a substantial investment in new roofing. Staff also provided an overview of the Alpine Barge anchor and pipe float replacement project. The committee referred this item to the board. This is one where the pumping facility is being improved. Additionally, staff shared an update on the Nicasio Spillway Modification Project, which included the identification of 3 different spillway modification alternatives and the development of a project description for an environmental impact report. Like most things, this project's a little more complicated than it seems in a simple-minded way. So it's being addressed to decide what to do, whether to approach it with a rubber dam or with a structure that can be conveniently and quickly lowered in the event that there's a significant water surge into the reservoir to maintain the safety of the dam. Staff provided an update on the phase 2 of the Pine Mountain Tanks project. Again, another very interesting project that's been around as long as I've been around. And it reviewed the update of foundation for the new tanks that will stand to replace the Pine Mountain tunnel, which was never designed to be used as a reservoir, but it has been used as a reservoir and a surge tank over the years. So that will be changed out with new tanks and new facilities. Finally, staff provided an update on the district's drought contingency plans, including a review of the various emergency options that could be pursued to respond to a drought in the event one occurred while water supply roadmap projects were still being implemented. Probably that statement can be restated to say that that's an ongoing issue, not just as simple as the roadmap implementation, but long-term, we need a plan to address what happens, a contingency plan for what happens during drought. These reports are on the webpage, and there's a video recording of the February 13th meeting for the public to review if interested. Thanks.
Great. Very busy planning meeting, Larry. Thank you for that. Were there any other meetings? Great. I just have, last Wednesday, I was able to present at the Tomales Bay Foundation talk. And Paul, again, another thank you for the information provided for the talk. I'm bringing them up to speed, their group, on the water supply projects we're working on, as well as the Nicasio dam raise project and the potential implications they have through that, all the way out to Tomales Bay. So very informative meeting, very engaged group of folks. And then last night, I presented Mill Valley City Council along with Southern Marin Fire on the preparation that we've done in terms of wildfire risk reduction, and then the hardening of our infrastructure on the watershed. And we've got a lot of big kudos from the City Council of Mill Valley for all the work we've done around the home hardening and the defensible space on our district lands, plus all the work that's being done through the BIFIP. So again, hats off to staff with that. Great. Next up is the consent calendar. And do we have a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Second. Terry, do we have any public comment on the consent items?
No, we do not.
Roll call vote, please.
Vice President Smith.
Aye.
Director Kusch.
Aye.
Director Mayer.
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
And President Sampson.
Yes,
Thank you.
here we are.
I
You
guess
know,
you're looking at me.
Well, the team there, and to the gentleman who still needs no introduction. You're right there. No, this is not just a regular agenda item for us. I think, before we start, I'd like to just reflect briefly on the significance of where we're at tonight, because it might seem like a long time ago, that was 2020, 2021, but, I can speak for most of the board that that is still fresh in our minds, and the need to be able to eliminate the possibility or greatly reduce it that we end up back there again is the reason why we're here again tonight too. And I will say this is a night that I've been looking forward to since joining the board, because this was one of the biggest issues coming out of the election. I know the public, all the customers here in Marin County are also very excited to see what potentially could come out of this meeting tonight. And I'm sure you and the staff are quite excited too. I mean, this is a long road for you as well. We acknowledge that, and all the work that you and the team has been putting in to get us where we're at tonight too. So I'm very excited to hear the presentation. And with that, see what you got.
Thank you for that introduction. I'll start by introducing the man that needs no introduction. Xavier Arias with Woodard and Curran. You've seen Xav at a number of meetings. He's been extremely helpful to us throughout on this project. And to my left is Tim Taylor with Carollo. And the Carollo team have been the ones guiding us through the different alternatives and designs for the conveyance project that we're going to be hopefully talking about a little bit more later as soon as I can open up our presentation. Great. So anyway, my name is Paul Selly. I'm the Water Resources Director with Marin Municipal Water District. As I was thinking about tonight in similar fashion, it is kind of important to note that we're not selecting a project to go approve a project tonight. That step comes a little bit later for us. That said, we've been working on this roadmap, and this is definitely a milestone for us. But it's not our destination. It's more of a, if we're sticking with the roadmap theme, more of a mile marker on our way, and a significant one at that. And tonight we'll show some of that journey that you talked about, President Sampson, that we've been on since 2020 in the onset of the drought, with some of the background information that we'll cover tonight. We'll talk about the water supply goal that came out of the strategic water supply assessment and our confidence level in that goal. And then, we've already heard comments this evening about water efficiency, and we'll see tonight that water efficiency has played a significant role in our water supply planning efforts. And then we'll just touch on the review of the alternatives and then get into the consideration of the staff recommendations. And hopefully there's a robust discussion on that. And we are, of course, seeking the board direction tonight on those recommendations. So without further ado, I'll get going.
we all remember 2020. And this slide is to help. There are some folks who I think it's been noted already in the comments that some folks kind of pop into our discussions and pop out. So we're going to try to cover 5 years worth of information in about 2.5 minutes here. But it's a lot. It really is a lot that's happened. I mean, it's literally a 5-year effort if you go back to 2020 on the onset of the drought. At that time, in order to react to a drought, the first tool that we reached for was water efficiency. It's one of the few things that you can do quickly to reduce that demand on that side of the equation, right? The demand and supply. And you can see that arrow on the bottom, the sustained and innovative water efficiency. And the program has awards to support that claim along the way. And it's been a consistent and sustained effort of public education and outreach throughout the past 5 years. In April of 2021, the board declared a water shortage emergency. And we're not alone. The rest of California was following us very closely. By October of that same year, we were down looking at about 6 months of remaining water supply. And that's really what's been galvanizing us ever since. Yet by December of that year, thanks to sort of 100-year rainfall events that occurred in October and December of that year, our reservoirs had refilled. And that gave us an opportunity to kind of pause and think about what we were doing. We were in the midst of an emergency project to try to get a pipeline across the bridge to try to get water in the event that the drought continued. The reservoirs refilled. We have a little bit of time to really think about what our best options were. And that's when the board took on the strategic water supply assessment. That effort concluded in about January or February of 2023 with the sort of adoption of the integrated roadmap. That is a number of projects and initiatives designed to cover the water supply goal that was established as part of that same strategic water supply assessment. As part of that effort, we kick off a detailed investigation of particularly conveyance options of winter water, Sonoma-Marin partnerships. We update a number of other efforts that we've done in prior studies around recycled water and desalination. And then, of course, looking closely at local storage alternatives for us. And that brings us to sort of January of this year, where in January 21st, I think we narrowed that list of alternatives down to 4 candidate projects that we were looking at. Also noting at that time that time slips by when you've got your head down and you're working, right? 2020 was the drought. We're in 2025, and yet demand has not yet bounced back the way we thought it might at one time. So looking at the demand levels and looking at the effect that water efficiency has had, and we'll talk about some of this in later slides, we're able to comfortably reduce the water supply goal by 2,000 acre feet, thanks to the efforts of our customers and the ongoing drive that the board has supported in terms of water efficiency. And that brings us to this evening, where we're considering the selection of a preferred project to move into design and environmental review. So let's just talk for a minute. The Strategic Water Supply Assessment established a goal of 8,500 acre feet. And you might reasonably question, how good is that estimate? These are not exact sciences. You're dealing with climate change. It's kind of a little bit hand wavy when it comes to figuring out how things are going to behave at the local level. Yet, when in planning purposes, we have to make a number of assumptions, and particularly reflecting the challenge around predicting the local effects of climate change. In our case, we had 3 major assumptions that made up this 8,500 acre foot supply goal. The first was the severe drought that we selected. This is a drought that's 4 years, comprised of the hydrology from 2020, 2021, 1976, and 1977. That drought of consecutive 4 years has never occurred. In our history, it's never, we didn't see it in the paleo data that was looked at, so triggering data. We did see longer droughts that were not as severe, similar to an 85 to 92 type drought, but they just were not as severe in terms of what we experienced in 2020, 21, and 76, 77. So that's the first thing. The second was we have we established a target of 30,000 acre feet of reservoir storage at the end of that severe 4-year drought. So that was a buffer. And why 30,000? Again, it was reflecting some of the uncertainties, but what if that happened to be a 5-year severe drought? So we're giving ourselves some buffer in these assumptions. As part of that 30,000 acre feet, we established a 10,000 acre foot, what we refer to as dead pool. This is inaccessible or unusable water for water quality purposes, or it's just stranded out in the reservoir. It can't get to the intake system. That's likely potentially an overestimate. It might be 7,000 acre feet, might be 8,000 acre feet. So there's some conservatism even in that estimate. And then, as I talked about a minute ago, reflecting demand in 2020, and the projections for demand in 2025 were well over 27,000 acre feet. Our demand today is around 23,000 acre feet of water. So we have a forecasted, built into that 8,500 acre feet is this 4,000 acre feet of demand that we're not seeing currently today. And we'll talk again a little bit about how we're going to deal and treat that. But essentially, that 4,000 acre foot of demand reduction can be accounted as water efficiency savings from our customers, from the sustained efforts that the board has supported through the water efficiency program. And we're going to suggest taking half, not all of that 4,000 acre feet to reduce the water supply goal from 8,500 acre feet to 6,500. So all told, our confidence in that 8,500 acre foot from the strategic water supply assessment, it's a conservative estimate, and it's built upon the conservative assumptions that I've just talked about. So then just looking briefly at water efficiency, over the past 4 years, it's, looking at our normal year water efficiency program, it's similar to looking at someone else's drought program. That's the extent and nature of the water efficiency programs that we've come up with and we've supported by incentives. It's really been creative this year and last in particular, taking a targeted sort of data approach to it, talking to our customers to understand what motivates them, and really just sustaining that sort of public education and outreach component that's so important, because we know that how we use water is kind of a behavioral modification that we need to engage with our customers. So on the chart inset on the right, you can see our recent water use trends, and then the yellow and the purple lines, the yellow reflecting the demand forecast line that was used in the strategic water supply assessment, and then the purple line reflecting a 2,000 acre foot reduction in that demand forecast. At the end of the blue line, you can see the difference between the blue line and the yellow line today is that 4,000 acre foot difference that I talked about.
Well, can we hang out here just for a second? Because I think this is an important component of how we're feeling more comfortable with what we're proposing or staff's proposing as an option here too. So first off, is 4 years enough time data-wise to understand a trend? Are we projecting a little bit more than we should?
I think we're taking a middle road there. We're not taking the full 4,000 that we might be tempted to today, recognizing that it's still possible that we see some rebound in future years. But typically, you'll see that the rebound has been a little bit quicker than what we've been experiencing.
Right. And I know there's going to be, there's always a conversation around additional housing requirements coming into the area and how that would impact what we're looking at right now in terms of informing the decision we're supposed to be making. So comfort-wise with that buffer reduction, we're still comfortable with the impact from potential housing.
Yes, indeed. The forecast that we used in the establishing the goal included the regional housing needs assessment numbers.
Great. Thank you for clarification. That's an important component. So I appreciate that. And then the unknown though is Mother Nature. And we continue to influence how the climate behaves. Are we going to be experiencing, is a 4-year drought going to be something not worst case scenario sooner than later, if that makes sense? So I do want us to remain flexible at some point because, you know, Mother Nature is what we can't control, but I appreciate the insight on those other two.
Yeah, Paul, I think it's important to highlight these two slides here. It's not insignificant that this board passed the first ever water efficiency master plan in the last year. We're seeing the fruits of work done by many years on this board and in this agency to be a leading award-winning effort for conservation. And that 2,000 acre feet, I think, is conservative. I think we can beat 4,000 acre feet. But without a doubt, reducing demand helps our supply. You need to look at it together. And your target of 8,500 acre feet, taking this into account, makes a ton of sense. And I think we should be very proud of what we're doing. And as Phil Sauter has said, and the IJ said in their recent editorial, you know, we should thank our customers for being so thoughtful. It is really an effort that we're all thinking about each other when we save water.
Yeah, well said. And, you know, going forward, we're not stopping here. I think part of a theme that you'll hear tonight is that we're going to move forward with our water efficiency goals. And we may it may sound like we're underestimating ourselves, but we do look up and measure and base our decisions on the data where we can. So we'll continue to implement that water efficiency master plan as we go along. Looking then at some of the roadmap projects that we've evaluated over the past year, certainly, and you know, I suppose I won't go through all of these, mercifully, I think, to some, but I would talk about just looking at the numbers on the far right, that cost per acre foot, that average dry year cost per acre foot. These are higher numbers than we're used to seeing, right? Our cost of Sonoma water is somewhere around $1,600 an acre foot. Maybe it'll go up in July to $1,700 or something of that nature. That still looks favorable compared to these. Yet this is not uncommon as we look throughout the state, as people are trying to address, you know, not everyday water supplies, but drought water supplies. And they just are more costly than your normal water projects. So then thinking again, just catching folks up, I know the board understands this process that we've undergone with the roadmap projects. The roadmap projects started with these sort of broad categories that you can see on the left, the Sonoma Marin Partnerships, local storage, and then new supply development, which includes, you know, a variety of recycled water and desalination as well. And in each of these cases, the team further developed the sort of suggestions that came out of the strategic water supply assessment. And in the case of the Sonoma Marin Partnerships, that's 13 different alternatives that we came up with. And in terms of local storage, there were further 11 storage alternatives that we looked at, and a total of 9 new supplies that were considered. And as we move those along to a short list down to 3 winter water projects, 3 local storage projects, and 9 new supply alternatives, it's still feeling difficult to be able to pull out a winner from that crowded field. Yet, as we continue the process of evaluating and screening, we're down to the final alternatives. In terms of conveyance, that's our PETA 3 project, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's in terms of local storage, we were not able to separate Sulahuly and Kent in terms of a preference at this stage of our analysis. And we've advanced the 10 million gallon a day desalination plant. So those are the final 4. And that brief description, 30, 40 seconds or whatever it was, represents a significant amount of work and support from the board and staff over the past few years. Again, you've seen this slide. This was we've gone through the evaluation of the alternatives that if anyone is interested that's listening, it's the January 7th board meeting followed by the January 21st board meeting. And this particular slide was presented at the January 21st board meeting. And it's our final 4, if you like. And what stands out from this slide for me is that bottom alternative, and the number of dark green, which is or in terms of scoring, is the best score that you can that you can achieve. And while that stands out as you just glance at it, I would point maybe to something like thinking about drought. When is the next drought going to show up? And that pressure to get something done, a sense of urgency that we all have. relates to that schedule and implementation criteria. And as you glance at this chart in terms of schedule and implementation criteria, it points us again to the conveyance alternative header 3. And for good reasons. You think about some of the complexities, and we'll talk about some of the considerations of the other projects as we go through, but just thinking about that schedule for implementation, really the conveyance project is the one that stands out for me. So looking briefly at desalination, this is a Bayside plant. Typically, we're thinking about situating this at the district's Pelican Way yard or in that vicinity. It's a 10 million gallon a day desalination plant. It's expandable to 15. What that means is that you're going to be bringing in 20 million gallons of bay water to produce 10 million gallons of drinking water. So it's a significant facility. It's not a small facility. You've got to deal with that brine. So as you desalinate water, about 50% of it ends up as brine, actually a little bit more. And it's doubly salty seawater that it's difficult to dispose of. You can't really just throw it into the bay. It's going to cause environmental harm. So in our case, we came up with an alternative that mixed it with CMSA fresh water to try to balance that challenge of discharging the brine. But there's still a significant infrastructure. Once you get past some of the environmental challenges, there's significant infrastructure that we would require to integrate a 10 million gallon a day plant at that location into our water system. And then as you think about some of the risks for a project like that, where the board want to move forward with it, the first thing that comes to mind is the ballot measure, right? We'd need to overturn a ballot measure in order to be able to finance and construct a desalination plant. There are no desalination plants constructed on the bay itself. And, you know, the risk of capital cost overruns due to the complexity of the permitting process and a lot of the environmental studies that would need to be done in order to facilitate the construction of a plant present a risk, both in terms of cost and schedule to implement that kind of a project. Once you get past the challenge of being able to construct the project and dealing with the environmental issues in San Francisco Bay, there are still significant operating and maintenance costs associated with desalination. For example, it might triple our energy costs for the district. Those are not insignificant. We pay, I think it's about $6.5 million in electric bills for the current configuration of the district. And we may be tripling that. And then the last bullet there, this sort of, it's a different source water than our other source waters, and the potential for this perceived inequity as a result. Looking at the storage expansion at Kent Lake, this would increase storage at Kent by 20,000 acre feet. And in a 4-year drought, that would yield about 5,000 acre feet per year in our 4-year drought scenario. There would be no need for additional infrastructure. Kent's already connected to our system, and we'd use it the same way that we use the existing water supply. For us, the risks and considerations of Kent are really related to the actual construction of Kent itself and requiring us to essentially empty the reservoir, take it out of service for 1 to 3 years. Of course, you'd plan for 1 year, but in these types of projects, it's possible that either the weather doesn't cooperate, or there is some sort of a structural analysis or geotech, analysis that missed something. And those sorts of things can add years. You have a short season. So when I say years, it's not like we're constructing from January through December. The construction window is sort of, August until it rains. And if it didn't rain, it would be until February 1st. So it's a sort of a 3-month construction window where you'd be running crews 10 hours a day out there. So delays are easy to imagine in a scenario like that. And of course, delays result in cost overruns. So the cost overrun risk for a project would be fairly not insignificant, let's say. And then projects like this typically have a very long and uncertain timeline for implementation, certainly on the order much more than 10 years. Sorry, I didn't talk about some of the complexities of Kent. We haven't talked much about Kent, so I'm kind of skipping over this component, but let me just get back to it. And Zav, you can jump in if I miss anything, but the top image here, it doesn't show. You see, this is Kent Reservoir, kind of a long dendritic reservoir here. And this is where the dam is, and that's where the rays would be. And you can see off a little bit to the left there in the topographic sort of display, there's a depression indicating a ravine that's there. So if you advance this dam, building the dam in a downstream manner, right? If the risk to us is taking Kent out of service, well, why don't you just build the downstream rays of the dam? And what you can see from the lower inset, now you're looking at the dam, is that the Kent rays goes into that ravine area. And that's going to require a substantial amount of material. And of course, most of this project is related to material. So the cost for doing a downstream raise, it's about double the material of doing the upstream raise. So I think the cost for the upstream raise is somewhere in the $520 million range for the estimate. If we're doubling the material, I don't know that it would quite double the cost, but it would be a significant cost adder. And then looking at the geometry of this dam, most dams are just sort of a straight line across. You can see in this dam, there's an initial straight shot across and then sort of a curved, there are two other sections to the dam, and those present some significant engineering challenges, adding risk and complexity to the project. So a downstream raise of Kent, not preferred. It's going to be much more costly and maybe more than challenging than an upstream raise of Kent.
Paul, were we to proceed with the conveyance project, we've been talking about how that could shift to some extent the vulnerability of taking it out for the year or two to do an upstream raise, downstream raise. So that these do kind of mesh potentially, and we'll talk more as we get into that.
Yeah.
Because we'd have, right, this theory behind the conveyance project, of course, is the ability to take more water during a drought. Conceivably here, we would be unlikely to do it during a drought, but it does provide the ability to bring in additional water, potentially to make up for some of that, to mitigate some of the risk. It really puts Kent on the table in a way that now it's difficult to imagine proceeding in a serious consideration of it.
Yeah, good point, Ben. And then the second reservoir expansion at Sulahuli, again, the same considered raise of 20,000 acre feet, yielding 5,000 acre feet per year. And some of the same sort of considerations you might imagine as Kent, but sort of notably, I guess what different here is the inundation of private lands. And sort of that's a level of controversy that we don't have, or complexity with Kent. So it's a bit of an adder in terms of complexity to the project, and that results, in similar constraints and challenges as it can in terms of the long time for implementation and potential for capital cost overruns. And then the conveyance of winter water. So this is as conceived as a 36-inch pipeline of about 13 miles, a pump station that would be built to move water from the North Marin Aqueduct at about the San Marin Drive area out to Nicasio. The dry year yield for us would be about 3,800 acre feet. And then future phases would increase that. And depending on the particular year that you're pumping, it could be significantly more than the 3,800 in phase one, and in phase two could be more than the 10,000 acre feet as well. The concept is pretty simple. Even in dry years, there's water that runs out to the ocean unused above the minimum in-stream flow requirements in the Russian River. And the concept is that we capture that water and put it in storage. There are, of course, risks and considerations with any project, and this one is no exception. Cost overruns are possible, but somewhat less likely than other projects. This is essentially at its core a pipeline project, which we understand fairly well, and you can kind of plan for. So the level of uncertainties that you might run into may be a little bit less than, say, a local storage project or a desalination facility, which is quite a complex facility. And then in terms of timeline to implementation, it could be as few as 4 years. But of course, if you run into challenges around acquisition of property to site the pump station, or if there are supply chain challenges regarding electrical switchgear, and even perhaps permitting could delay, a 4-year implementation schedule. I think one component to note here is that as I've talked to people, there is a little bit of confusion as to what winter water is. So the blue inset box attempts to define it as we think about it here. And that's water that's in the Russian River above the minimum in-stream flow requirements. And it occurs as a result of precipitation events, which of course, think atmospheric rivers that occur during this period of October through May. And those events occur even in the driest of years. So that water that we would be taking is sort of run of the river water. It's going out to the ocean. It's not coming out of storage in Lake Sonoma or Lake Mendocino. It's coming directly out of the river as a result of precipitation events. So then thinking about, well, how available is that? You said in even the driest years. So this is a exceedance curve of water availability during that period of October through May on the Russian River, and represents about 111 years worth of data. And you can see the purple line there is the conveyance project that we're considering, that capacity of around 4,000 acre feet. So if you go over to the left-hand side and the y-axis there, you'll see the acre feet of water that would be available. And you might say, well, okay, 20,000 acre feet is available 0% of the time, according to this chart. If then you were to move to the 50% probability percentage and go upward, you might say, well, that looks like about 15,000 acre feet of water is available 50% of the time. So how many, and looking at our line at the PETA 3 level of 4,000 acre feet, it would suggest it's available 100% of the time. And there's some headroom above that, right? So if the water is available that particular year, there's capacity in the transmission system, the pump stations aren't all mothballed for maintenance or some unusual event occurring, we could have access to that water through these facilities. So then as we think about moving forward and closing that water supply gap to the goal that we're looking for, the 6,500 acre feet, what might that look like? Well, we know that we're going to do water conservation. That's a given. So that's our first line, and that's going to continue. We're going to continue the implementation of that award-winning program and the master plan. We know we're working on in-district improvements, and that we have the ability to optimize our operations. If we were to construct a conveyance project, right, the planning and pre-design is kind of where we are. And these orange circles represent a decision that would be made. And at some point, the board would authorize us to move forward with the design of phase 1, and then another decision to move forward with construction of phase 1. And then you would operate that project. In parallel, we know we're working on the Nicasio spillway. So that's happening in parallel with a conveyance project, and there'll be decision points along that project for the board to take, and we would construct it ultimately and operate it. At that point, you might take an evaluation step and say, well, how are we doing? What does the future look like now? And should we design a phase 2 of a conveyance project? Or should there be some other decision, some other large storage project, a desal or a DPR project that the board might want us to look into and design and construct and operate? So this approach that we're taking, and it's been a consistent theme throughout, this is an adaptive management approach to our water resource needs. And it's going to build, we have the foundation tonight, hopefully with a conveyance project that the board is interested in, and we can move in any direction from there. We're not hamstrung. It doesn't preempt any other decisions that we want to make. So then meeting our water supply goal, just if it's 8,500 acre feet, we've talked about the water efficiency. We're able to reduce that by 2,000 acre feet. The Nicasio spillway has a range of potential payback for us in terms of water from 750 to 1,000 acre feet. The electrification of the Sewell-Hooley pump station will allow us to use that pump station on a fairly regular basis. The connection of Phoenix to Bontempi would allow us to take water, more than just the once out of Phoenix and place it in Bontempi for use. And there are other in-system improvements in the distribution system that we're looking at that we think are going to give us between 1,000 and 1,500 acre feet. And then combining that with the conveyance project, PETA 3 Phase A, which has a range conservatively of 3,800 acre feet to 4,750 acre feet, giving us a total supply that we're planning for somewhere between 8,000 and just below 10,000 acre feet per year. What then would sort of question, what's that going to do to our reservoir storage levels in a drought? So this is our reservoir storage levels throughout the last drought, starting in 2019 and building up. And you can see the devastating effect in October of 21, where we're sitting at 20-something thousand acre feet of water, looking at running out within the next 6 months or so. If we're successful in our water supply efforts, and all of those projects we just talked about are constructed, and again, this is an illustration. If all of those projects are constructed, the blue line here reflects what our storage levels would have been at the end of the 2021 drought. So you're adding nearly 20,000 acre feet to the system. Now we're going to do more modeling and come back to you with a more defined curve than this. This is an illustration, and there are certain simplifications that we've taken in order to produce this quickly, but we'll take a look at more exactly and over time how this storage variation will help us.
Yeah, I really like this illustration because it does show that there's additional benefits that we don't really talk about in terms of roadmap implementation. Certainly, it's a heck of a lot better to be, the low point. I don't know, what is that?
It's about
Over
20.
10,000 acre feet.
Right, yeah.
What is it?
It's about 20,000.
Yeah,
difference.
20,000 acre feet. So that essentially, if it didn't rain, would buy us another year and a shot at another winter that is a game changer in itself. But the other notable thing it does for me, you look at the black line, and we triggered the 2 voluntary, early on, and then mandatory reductions. And what would have occurred had we had the projects implemented, we would have just gone through the voluntary and not hit the mandatory. And that plays out, in all ways, meaning the frequency of being in drought is greatly reduced. So it lessens the whiplash essentially to our community of in drought, out of drought, in drought, out of drought, in a way that I think brings a sense of confidence in the water supply, confidence in businesses and the real estate market, and it goes on. So I do think this is really an interesting, important benefit that we don't really tend to talk about because we're focused on the hard drought and saving us essentially, but this is a notable additional benefit.
And it also gives us more reliability in our revenues. So there's the whiplash that the community feels. There's also the whiplash that we experience during droughts when our revenues crash.
Right. That's a great point. And, once you hit mandatory, it triggers a drought fee. So, right, we get whacked, our customers get whacked, and it just does bring a sense of stability to our water service that we provide Marin.
So then to the staff recommendations, and it's a bit of a lengthy list, but I think it's important to be, inclusive and comprehensive in what we're seeking direction on. So we're asking that the board direct staff to proceed with the design and environmental review of the PETA 3 conveyance project, and we're going to work on a new name for that. We're asking the board to direct staff to continue to support the ongoing water efficiency efforts and to continue roadmap activities as listed below here. So investigating the feasibility of increased local storage for additional water supply. And you may, one of those components of local storage will be the spillways. Remember, we've talked about the Nicasio spillway. We've still got the other spillways to investigate as well. And to continue to monitor desalination and any technological advances and cost improvements for that. Pursue opportunities for grant funding and public-private partnership for recycled water projects, and to identify and evaluate other potential water supply opportunities such as groundwater banking as they arise. And of course, develop a detailed understanding of the current state of science on climate change, including the rate of change and potential effect on water resources. Our next steps then, should the board direct us to, would be the selection of the consultant for design of the PETA 3 conveyance project, and that would be an RFP process. Both of these would be. So we generate an RFP, we go out, interview consulting teams, make a selection on our committee, and bring that recommendation back to the board for both design and environmental documentation. And of course, continuing to advance the roadmap projects and initiatives as directed by the board. And that's the end of the presentation.
Paul and team, thank you very much. And also note your graphs, especially the color coded ones, really helped me personally understand the benefits of each project, and the additional graphics you put in the staff report tonight really drove the points home. So thank you for that extra effort to do that. And with that, we'll go ahead and start with board member comments. Director Russell, online.
I think it was a very interesting presentation, Paul. I'm a little disappointed that we aren't prepared to eliminate certain alternatives. I think it is a undesirable approach. I think we should be fine tuning a little more than we are. And for instance, eliminating things like Sulahuli out of consideration. I understand the interest in keeping all alternatives open, but I just don't see the logic of not taking a position and moving things forward. It seems a bit of status quo. I think it's a logical approach. I've already expressed to you my concerns about putting drinking water in an open water reservoir and then having to retreat it. But maybe that's just the way life is. As we are aware, our distribution system is backwards for inserting more water from the bottom to the top. Unfortunately, it's logical, but the pipes get smaller as they come down the hill, and it's difficult to push them back up. As we also talked, the folks in my part of town, the eastern county side, Tiburon, Sausalito, received the Russian River water already. That's how it enters the system. It feeds our folks. It would be nice, I think, if we could think about some kind of a pumping system to push it up the hill to save the drinking water as drinking water instead of putting in an open water reservoir and then having to retreat it. So those are the things that pop out at me. I was impressed with the additional complexity identified in the spillway modifications. I think there's a lack of understanding I had the opportunity to go back and read the letter that Larry Minikes was referring to about a lack of progress. And there's just a basic misunderstanding there of the role of spillways and the complexity of changing things. As we're all aware that the design of the spillway is one of the most critical aspects of a reservoir because it is a fail-safe device that saves the dam from being overtopped. And overtopping of the dam, of course, is a disaster. If we recall back to the Orville situation in Lake Shasta, when they got very concerned when the spillway was damaged because they weren't worried about the spillway in particular. They were worried about the dam being overtopped and then the potential for a full failure of the dam because it gets cut with the water. So in any case, nice job. Like I say, I think we should be moving a little further, quicker to identify those projects which aren't that useful or feasible. I mean, you know, if the assessment of Kent is correct, which it appears to be to me, that it's a 3-year or 1 year to 3 year non-use of the reservoir, that kind of ends my interest in that particular alternative, because I think that's too much of putting all your eggs in one basket. So anyway, good job.
Director Russell, I just wanted to respond to one of your comments. We have heard interest in, for example, taking Suluhuli off the table as we've thought about it. There is just the practical, as you know, an elected body can't kind of by definition tie the hands of future elected bodies. As Paul noted, when he referenced the staff recommendation on local storage, our focus, our thinking is moving the assessment of the other spillways. And that's what we intend to do were the board to move forward with those recommendations. But anyway, I just wanted to touch, I do understand that concern. I don't think taking it off from future consideration is really something that we could do, but I understand certainly the sentiment.
Well, as I proposed the other day, Ben, I think the most important aspect of this whole evaluation is that these get memorialized into a report, because pathways that are not good or not as good at a given point in time need to be documented so that the future folks don't go down that path again, thinking they've discovered some new alternative that was never looked at. So I think that is the thing that I see as critical, is to get this into a report that says, you know, this is the result of what we looked at. And there are 2 pathways that look good, 5 that don't look so good, but could still be done in the future. So I agree with you completely. But you know, as far as tying the hands of future board, I mean, I don't know how that would occur. You know, future boards are going to do what future boards wish to do, guided by staff's input. So I'm not as concerned about that particular aspect as looking at it from the, like I say, of cutting off pathways that aren't so good, and putting them there to be documented that we looked at them, but they're not, at least at this point in time, as feasible. DSA would be the perfect example of that as well.
Understood. That makes sense. Thank you.
Dr. Kush.
Thanks, Matt. Paul, thanks a lot for the great summary of many rounds of discussion to date. You've taken pains to emphasize that we're making gradual progression, taking gradual steps, but it still, as Matt said when we started, feels like an particularly important decision for us, even to make take clear direction on substantial planning for water supply development. Frankly, Marin Water's urgent need for additional water supply is what motivated me to seek a position on this board. And additional water supply was by far the main priority that voters, our customers, emphasized to me when I was campaigning in 2022. So this does feel like a big day. And I'll also admit that the 2 years it's taken us to get here has sometimes felt too long. But now in reflection, I'm thankful that those atmospheric river gods gave us a few good rainy seasons and the time to make the best informed evidence-based decisions. And I'm thankful because when I took this seat, I had some strong preconceptions about new water supply development. Now I know that most of my preconceptions were poorly informed. I sometimes get irritated when my board colleague, Director Russell, says, and he says it a lot, right? New board members have huge amounts to learn when we take on this role. But I also understand that Larry's not saying that we, meaning new board members, are ignorant generally. What he's saying is that every institution, every water supplier is unique, and we have to understand this specific context. So, Paul, what have I learned about Marin water and water supply development through this process that you've been walking us through? Few things. One, Marin water has to plan for intermittent water shortages. This is very different from suppliers that face chronic water shortages. Desalination, water reuse technologies are currently designed for suppliers facing chronic shortages. Until those technologies are adapted for intermittent operations, they're not the best options for Marin water, and they're not affordable for our customers. Two, the Russian River is a unique water resource. You've, in previous presentations, highlighted the scale of that watershed, about 50 times larger than what we have here in Marin, producing on average years about 1.6 million acre feet per year, about half of that in drought years, still much above current demands on the system. That is something that I did not understand at all prior to joining the board. Number three, the days when Marin could exist largely within its own bubble are over. Most of our big existential challenges, sea level rise, transportation management, workforce housing, those will all require collaboration and cooperation with our regional neighbors. Water supply development that will improve the resiliency of our neighbors, as well as Marin water, particularly our neighbors in the north, promotes regional planning broadly. I think that's very important. For water resources development should be ongoing. As our roadmap illustrates, it's not one and done. No single intervention by itself will address our water supply sustainability. It's a process. And then finally, from the outside, Marin may not appear very diverse, but I think it really depends on how you define diversity. And over the last 2 years, I've learned more about our West Marin communities and how they contribute to what makes Marin great right now. And we have to respect their views and concerns. We have to respect everyone's views and concerns when we're making decisions. So I think you can see that where I'm going is in support of what you've proposed as for board approval and next steps. Maybe I think just if possible, I would like language in there that future storage evaluations prioritize examination of possibilities at Kent Lake, recognizing that's very daunting, and prioritize the ongoing assessment of spillway modifications that are underway. And then I think just one request, Paul, is that as we think about, you have a sense, you've been trying to explain how improved conveyance of winter water is going to help us address droughts, but it feels very abstract as to what point do we turn it on At what point in the drought cycle will our forecasting improve to the degree that we can, start to bring winter water before we're, in the midst of a drought? So I think it would be helpful going forward if you could, every so often explain how we're calibrating our import of water even now. So to start to understand the process you use, that staff uses to determine when to make purchases, when to hold off and rely more on our own supplies. And I know there's a lot of art in that. It's not an exact science, but just understanding how you're doing it now, I think will have us better prepared when we're thinking about greater reliance on conveyance for drought management. That's it. Really happy to be at this point, which I fully agree with based on the all the evaluations that you've done and presented to us. Thanks to Zav as well.
Thank you. Director Mayor.
Thank you for all of that information, all the hard work you've done. Thank you for meeting with me many times in the last few weeks with constituents and other people that wanted to get clarification on this. Can you just give a couple of high-level bullet points about how wildfire risk affects this option? Does it make it more desirable in your point of view, less desirable, and why?
It's an interesting question, Director Mayer. I mean, wildfire risk for us, Marin Water, we're thinking our own watershed. So we've got 5 reservoirs on Mount Tam that could be impacted by wildfire. This conveyance option that we're talking about is coming from, obviously, from a different watershed. It's being conveyed into a reservoir that's, again, Nicasio, in a different watershed than the Mount Tam watersheds. So in that sense, it's an additional source of water and increases our resilience in terms of wildfire in that respect.
Okay, great. That's, for me, that is one of the things that makes it such an attractive option, but I didn't know if there were things I was not considering in terms of, I'm asking this partially because I'm getting a lot of comments from constituents. Of course, that's on everybody's mind right now. I want to just say a couple things for the record and bear with me. I know there are going to be a lot of strong opinions about the fact that right now we're looking very likely as conveyance as first choice in terms of moving to the next step. I'm not surprised by the strength of opinions I've been getting. What I am surprised by is how strong the opinions are with so little information. And for the love of Pete, please, the basic information is so easily available. Go look at some of the meetings. You can just even download the PowerPoints. There is so much information as to why this seems like the best option right now. And for me, a couple of those things are, one, that it actually makes increasing local storage more viable. So, taking Kent out for 1 to 3 years when it's our major reservoir is not a viable option. But if we have this water as backup, it becomes a viable option. And that to me is hugely attractive. I do think that from what I understand, and the risk of wildfire and what it could do to the watershed, I actually really like the idea of spreading our risk around and having some of this water coming from elsewhere. Pray that, we won't both have huge fires going on at the same time in Marin and Sonoma. It seems like it does have less roadblocks in all kinds of ways, so it's a much more viable option. And one of the biggest things I am really happy about is that this project is doable with the rate increase that we, actually, I shouldn't say we, because I was not on the board, but that I think the board smartly put into place, realizing that if we wanted to increase water resiliency, we needed to get out of debt and generate some funds. So knowing how strongly people feel about the rates, I think this seems like the only option where we could do that without having to increase the rates even higher. And so I'm just hoping that some of these comments will be recorded and, people will understand that there is a method to the madness, and that to say that this is a well-studied decision is probably the understatement of the century. And so I think that's it. I'll get off my soapbox. But again, I really appreciate how incredibly available the staff has made themselves, how much information you've given me when I've questioned things on this, and how much time you've given to my constituents when they have expressed doubts and concerns, because this is just such an important topic. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the work. I'm going to read some comments. 28 months ago, Ranjiv Kush, Matt Sampson, and I were elected to help push our water agency to create a water resiliency plan. Our community had just gone through a period of significant stress, pandemic, and historic drought. It became clear that Marin Water had no plan. It had studies, but there was actual no water supply and efficiency plan. Public angst was expressed through the exclamation point of a grand jury report with a set of recommendations, some valid and some all we heard and all we listened. We approved the first ever water efficiency master plan that this agency has ever seen, that's now resulted in at least 2,000 acre feet of savings, and we think much, much more. We're now guiding our staff to drive a key set of solutions to get us close to 10,000 acre feet of incremental water for our community, but we're not done yet. We took on this challenge head first, and the results are strong. It's my belief that this winter water conveyance solution is a win-win-win-win. Win number one, it is affordable. It's within our current bond capacity. And thank goodness we supported the rate increase, because now we can afford this and we can do this. Thank you to the community for stepping up with us. Win number two, timeliness. We know we can do this. We know how to do this. We do not have to crush private lands and this will have nominal environmental impact. It can be implemented within a few years. Win number three, it helps us capture excess water falling into the ocean and will buffer our needs during drought years. How often do we hear, why aren't we capturing this water that's falling and raining in these cycles? Well, now we're here to do it. Win number four, this is a regional approach. This solution does not just help Marin, although it helps us significantly. It helps our partners, it helps our neighbors, it helps West Marin, and it helps Sonoma. And this is a powerful, powerful new vision that Marin is bringing to Sonoma and to our entire North Bay regional partners. It will help preserve Sonoma's reservoirs. This is water that's not going through their reservoirs. It's coming from the Russian River, instead of going straight into the ocean, we can help guide it towards us. This is a massive benefit for Sonoma County as well. We and I personally have spent over 2 years building strong relationships with Marin and Sonoma and their political leaders. We have gone city by city and town by town, across Marin and across Sonoma, gaining input, listening on a listening tour, and hearing their feedback and their input. This solution, it appears to help serve all as best as we possibly can in an affordable manner. Today, we are firmly recommending putting on hold, not forever, but putting on hold significant efforts in major dam upgrades at Suluhuli, Nicasio, and Kent. These are not projects that we are saying we should put a lot of energy into right now. We're not killing them forever, but we are laser beam focused on the solutions that you have put forward in front of us. We're putting on hold major investments on desal and recycling. There's many opportunities for that in the long term, and without a doubt, we should continue to understand how those opportunities will make themselves available to us. We are looking at other smaller recycling projects, but this is our focus right now. So there is a very strong, clear recommendation to this and support of the staff to have this level of focus. With that said, we're not done yet. And as we begin, it's important to note that achieving water supply resiliency is an ongoing effort. And I encourage this agency long after I am gone to continue the effort to keep the short, medium, and long-term plans updated and moving. Never give up, never stop, never get caught without a water resiliency set of solutions again.
Thank you. Paul, again, to you and the team, thank you. It's been a long journey for you guys as well. And I couldn't even imagine to count how many slides you've built in PowerPoint over the past 2 years, because it's an impressive amount. So thank you once again. But I do think we're at an inflection point. And what I mean by that is when we look at the district's timeline for water supply increase projects, I'm hoping 2025 is on that dot there significantly, because the last big one of those is from the mid-'80s, early '80s. And I also hope that we don't have as big of a gap again between 80 and 2025 for the next water supply project, because as has been mentioned here tonight, this is an ongoing process for this. And I think if you asked any of us earlier, is this the end all be all answer to our issues? I would say no to that. And the reason for that is it's a step, it's another progression as we continue to deal with a changing climate and demands, the different demand cycles on our water system itself. I see this pipeline, or the soon to be hopefully name change PETA 3, as really a component of a solid water foundation. It's going to provide us some more water. It's going to buy us time before we can look at and invest more resources and time and energy into a long-term project. Even though this is considered one of our long-term options, I feel that it's just a component to get us where we need to be. And as mentioned tonight, the flexibility that this project brings really opens up a lot of doors that previously I don't think we could have opened without something like the benefit of this project is going to bring. And like Director Mayer mentioned, spreading our risk is really important. For us not to be resilient on one source or have all of our proverbial eggs in one basket is a big deal. And it might not seem like a big deal today, but if something is to happen, you know, the deflection of the North Marin Aqueduct 2 years ago, the pretty devastating fires we're seeing in Los Angeles. I mean, we are susceptible to those types of events. And I see this as a planning component of addressing that risk and being able to spread it and move it around. So again, another strength for that project. But I think, you know, overall, we're still this is a reactionary project. You know, this is a reaction out of the last drought. And I think reaction is not the way we should be. But now that we have this going, this project and these efforts, not only the conservation effort, but all the other efforts that have been found or shown, allow us to be, for the first time in a long time, proactive. And I think that's where we need to be focused, a proactive approach to continually evaluating our water supply, our demand, and then increasing any projects or resources that are needed to address any of the items that come out of that. So I very much support the project as going for the reasons mentioned by my colleagues and the ones that I mentioned as well. So thank you again. And with that, Terry, public comment.
Yes.
Hey, Matt, I have one more quick comment.
Please, Larry.
The importance of the assessment that was advanced by Paul is that it's not necessary to build the storage in Marin if the storage exists in Sonoma. That is a key takeaway, that while Marin tends to be desiring of control and having everything in its pocket, the reality is it's only necessary to have the access, not to have the physical change. So you don't need another reservoir or more storage necessarily in Marin if you can get it from Sonoma. That's
Great.
it.
Thank you.
Can I actually make one more comment? Sorry. One thing I just wanted to ask, a couple of people have commented to me that they went to look for reports. Some of those were commission reports we paid a lot of money for. You all paid a lot of money for, and the community paid a lot of money for. And some, I think, were maybe the PowerPoints that are used in the presentations, and folks found them very hard to find on the website. So I don't know if that can be looked into at all, but I think that that is really important that people are able to find that information.
Yeah, I would note that we're fortunate to have Adrian on our team, and she has been thinking nonstop about this and developing new information, fact sheets on all the alternatives with details so folks can access it, talking points so we're all clear and consistent messaging in terms of the factual content that we talked about tonight and more. And also, I believe thinking about a landing page, maybe you want to speak to that, Adrian, with, specifically with all the information very accessible.
Yeah, in the next few days, we're hoping to update the water supply resiliency webpage to really function as a good kind of home base for all the information and get us up current to where we are. That's good feedback. If people are having trouble finding reports, we could include some instruction on how to look for past presentations in our meetings and agenda hub from that page though too. So we'll keep that in mind. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks.
Rajiv, do you have-
Yeah. Adrian, for the future, I know this is not feasible now, but often I'll remember, a presentation that was given in a committee meeting but I don't remember the date. And in some future version, if we're able to search keywords on the website and find presentations, that would be helpful.
Yeah, just for the benefit of everyone listening, the meetings and agenda hub, which you can access from our homepage, it is a separate portal, but it's where we house all of our presentations, staff reports, meeting minutes, and you can search by committee, by year, and by month. You just have to filter out once you type your keyword searches. But we do have 10 years of meetings housed in there. So when we did switch to that portal last year, we carried over 10 years of records.
Yeah, it's definitely all there.
And to continue on the trend of just one more comment, one of the things, Paul, that I was hoping to get out and I didn't, I apologize, but if we're successful in moving this project into design, it's going to be critical that we get regular updates in a time frame and a schedule, because time is not on our side. And one of the big benefits of this is feasibility in terms of timeliness. And so understanding what that looks like and then regularly updating us on how the progress is going. I'm sure you have plans, but just to reiterate. Great, thank you. Terry.
Okay, sorry if I mispronounce names. I have about 12 speakers. The first one I have is, the first three are Phil Sauter, Carol Dolcini, and Maria Gisletta.
So thank you very much for the presentation. I'm always glad to see conservation sit at the top of the list of water supply alternatives. And it was good to see a specific achievement listed, in this case, a 2,000 acre-foot decrease in supply needs. That lets us begin to compare the impact of conservation relative to other alternatives. As I've expected it would, this goal lets us reduce the impact, expense, and possible quality loss of other alternatives. It's a good step forward, and many thanks to staff for including this goal and to the board for requesting it. The next step for fully including demand reduction is the comparison with other supply alternatives. We'll need the assumptions that led to this goal so that we can make sure we've set the right target, along with the specific programs and costs necessary to achieve this goal. We can't make a valid comparison with other alternatives without this information, but with it we can. This will be worth the effort, since even with full AMI rollout, water efficiency comes in as the lowest cost project alternative. It's been a pretty long slog from the days when we said that conservation wasn't predictable or reliable to today, when not only are we moving away from that belief, but we can actually begin to measure its impact relative to other alternatives. And as Director Smith suggests, I think it would be useful to include an additional 2,000 to 4,000 acre feet of demand reduction as a specific item in the final alternatives grid on slide 8. I think it would have the highest rating in all 7 evaluation categories. It would rank first or second among the alternatives. Of course, comparing volumes and costs are a necessary first step, but I think it's also good to acknowledge that demand management, most importantly outdoor demand, through predictable conservation programs will alleviate other problems that ride along with some of the other alternatives. First, with conservation as a source of supply, we won't have to accept lower water quality or additional levels of treatment. Second, we won't have to waive off the majority of customers who voted against a desal plant in the bay. Third, we won't have to rely as heavily on other water agencies whose interests may one day diverge from our own. Fourth, we won't have to flood homes and businesses in West Marin. Fifth, we won't have to incur large capital expenses that hit all customers so that a relative few can enjoy water-intensive landscapes. And six, we won't have to gamble with the State Water Resources Board about possible increases in environmental releases. Once again, thank you very much for bringing conservation more fully into the discussion of supply alternatives. And I hope and think we'll all benefit from realizing its value and increasing predictability as an important component of water supply. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Long trip to the podium. All right. Ready, go. Good evening, board. Good evening, staff. These are prepared comments for what I had thought would have been a slightly different outcome, but I'll say them anyway. I would like to thank you for your diligence and thoughtfulness in pursuing water supply solutions that can work for all of Marin, and for your willingness to engage with all stakeholders, myself included. I also want to acknowledge and thank former board members Monty Schmidt, Cynthia Kohler, Larry Bragman, and Jack Gibson, whose efforts contributed to tonight's decision. It is encouraging that the recommendation highlights the primary importance of building and driving greater water efficiency. Over the longer term, once operational, conveyance will provide a reliable water source during times of drought. Now, going forward, as you suggest, investigating the feasibility of local storage options, please keep in mind that sometimes you can measure an achievement not only by what is done, but what is not done. Tonight's decision to select conveyance means tonight that the Sulihule Dam will not be raised. The reservoir will not be expanded by 20,000 acre feet. The residents and the friends of Hicks Valley are deeply relieved if tonight's decision does not result in the loss of this precious community and land. We urge you for storage solutions to look to projects outside of the Walker Creek watershed. Thank you.
Thank you. After Maria Gisletta is Sally Gale and Abe Hardin.
Good evening. The community of and surrounding the Sulihule Reservoir appreciates both staff and board efforts to increase water supply reliability. We feel that conveyance tied to a partnership with Sonoma Water provides a long-term dependability, a dependability that will not require a potential 30% rate hike for your consumers that would come with increasing local storage. We appreciate the acknowledgement that these reliability goals can be attained without destroying multi-generational families and businesses, as well as expansive sensitive habitats and species dependent on those protected lands. These lands are legally protected for a slew of reasons. Dissolving that protection would set a precedence that nothing is sacred in Marin. It is plausible that in the light of your findings, the extensive challenges surrounding it, further studies regarding the expansion of the Sulihule can be removed from your long-term analysis and consideration. We understand the importance of moving forward with a sustainable goal in mind, and what we trust is information gathered, expressed, and observed regarding the Sulihule Reservoir over the past 46 years can give clarity that it is an infeasible and unsustainable alternative. I know now, after these past 3 years, that it is imperative that I and we continue to be diligent in protecting the community surrounding the Sulihule Reservoir. I owe that to those who forged our beginning, as well as those who I pray will hold the future of this valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Gale, Abe Harden, and then Bob Middlestead, please.
Good evening. I wanted to say right off that I do appreciate your process. I've been to several of these meetings and I am impressed with the thoughtfulness that you are all putting into these weighty decisions. So thank you for that. I also would like to point out your staff and kind of make the point that these are the people who make government work. And this is a pretty good example of government at its best, I feel, especially in the light of what is going on with federal employees. I think it doesn't hurt to take a minute and pause and just appreciate our government workers on all levels of government, county, state, and federal. So thank you all for that. I'm very supportive of the idea of using the PETA-3 conveyance option. It makes a lot of sense for all the reasons that were mentioned. I think the biggest one to me is that there's just a lot more water available that way, 50 times more water availability. I mean, it seems like it's just a very good idea and very much worth pursuing. I have to admit, however, that I am disappointed that you are not able to take Suluhuli off your list. I understand that in a water crisis, you want to have all your options available, but at the same time, I think Suluhuli is a different breed of cat. And in the case where you actually own Kent Lake and you're not hurting actual people, ranchers, taking away from the culture of a community and impacting their livelihoods. To me, it's just a no-brainer to go toward Kent Lake and not toward Suluhuli. So my recommendation would be take Suluhuli off the table. But at the same time, I am very supportive of your PETA-3 choice. Thank you.
Hello, directors and staff. Congratulations on selecting the preferred water supply project after an extensive and thorough process. In addition, congratulations on reaching the water supply goal without needing to raise rates or destroy families and sensitive habitats. As the board continues to study local storage options, I urge you not to continue to study enlarging the Suluhuli Reservoir. Apart from the superiority of other projects, the cost would minimally require a significant increase in rates. Significant. A recent letter from California Trout urged the board to discontinue the study of Suluhuli and continue the board's commitment to salmon restoration of Walker Creek. The opportunity to continue to make positive environmental decisions should be embraced. The decision to discontinue further exploration of expanding Suluhuli Reservoir is one of those positive opportunities. In closing, congratulations again on the decision to select a project that will meet the needs of all stakeholders without additional costs to ratepayers. A project that does not destroy sensitive habitats. A project that works for all of Marin County.
Thank you. After Bob Middlestead is Jeff Brecker and Larry Minikis.
Good evening, Bob. The hallmark of this board and the staff has been to make decisions based on facts and data and not based on rhetoric or emotions or playing to the crowd. The staff's recommendation lives up to that approach. I think the staff got it just right. And there's going to be more time to continue to investigate. There's a lot of questions still to be answered. And I think one of them is to put all this in context, what's the cost of running out of water? I think that's one big selling point for what you are doing. I want to spend a couple of minutes on raising dams and that option. I understand that's not the primary one. It's going to continue to be investigated, as I think it should be. 90% of our watershed rainfall goes into the bay, and that's an obvious source of water. I think it makes sense to have at least two options to be considered to compare. And I'm glad there's going to be more time on a slower pace, perhaps, to investigate and answer some questions. One question, I think, is what funding would be available? You know, a couple of months ago, it was easy to say maybe there'd be some federal funds. That's probably a little harder to say now. Another area would be the staff report says that it's infeasible to raise the dam at Kent, but that risk can be modified or reduced a bit by conveyance. I think further time will help quantify or further explain how much of that risk is reduced. Infeasible without conveyance, what's that reduced to with conveyance? The third thing that I think there'll be time to study is what's the best place to increase storage. And as people have mentioned, maybe it's Sonoma, maybe it's not in our own backyard. And the fourth, and I don't want to be controversial here, but I just want to put this in context, Suluhuli still is a possibility based on the staff report, and I think correctly so. You know, I've talked before that the number of head of cattle and the acres of farmland we're talking about is less than a fraction of 1%. And there's still a lot of questions to be answered. How many actual ranches are we talking about? I don't think that's been disclosed yet. How many of the homes that would be in the 500 acres are actually occupied, and how many people actually live there? When were these ranches purchased? There's some indication that one of the largest was purchased in 2016. So I think I'm happy that we'll have time to consider all the questions that remain. Thank you.
Sure. Next, Jeff Breckler, Larry Minnick.
I think I'd like to refrain.
Okay, thank you. So Larry Minnickus, Steve Kinsey, and Iris Starr, please.
Good evening. And actually, this is an interesting evening because it was about 5 years ago this night, or relatively this night, that the board began to really panic because we were really running out of water. And this was the beginning of the process. So it's coming full circle, and that's incredibly interesting here. I encourage the board, we encourage the board to go forward with staff recommendation on PETA 3. However, there's, I believe, could be a shortcoming here in that what we need to build into this calculation are the 14,210 homes that are mandated. This is not a political discussion. It's just factual. We're supposed to bring these homes in by 2031. We're talking about, according to staff, an additional 8% in usage, which brings us to about 1,750 to 1,850 additional acre feet, which under this plan we'll just be able to cover. You know, so we have enough water to 2031 when we're supposed to have these built out to meet that need. However, looking at slide 15 here is where it really becomes critical. And this is the slide that is the integrated approach to provide flexibility. Now, the way that this is laid out is the conveyance of PETA 3 will construct phase 1 and start operation before we start even into design of phase 2. And what I'm suggesting is bring this back to the board soon. Plan out to 2032. In your agenda, it says that this can be a phased approach. So phase in the second stage a couple of years later, so that by 2032 or 2033, you've got that 10,000 acre feet that we're bringing in from Sonoma, and then we'll be in really good shape. And I think we're really going to save ourselves a lot of money by this board planning both these projects out. There's a phase 3 in here, but I don't know what phase 3 is, and I can't find any reference to it. So it would be helpful to know what that phase in. But I think that approach is actually a more conservative, while more expensive approach. I think it's the way to go. Instead of pushing that out for another board to look at, do it now, do the planning. If things change, you can always back off it, but have it there so that as you're into phase 1, you're beginning to start on phase 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to take the opportunity. It was mentioned, but it might not have been clear that the RENA projections are included in our analysis. So when we're looking at how much water we need and future demand, that's been incorporated in there. And then somewhat of a side issue, there's a natural inclination when you think about new residential units to look at our average demand and extrapolate it sort of in a linear fashion, meaning if on average a typical residence uses X water, well, we'll have 3,000 more. And it doesn't really work that way. And specifically, most of the new development's going to be multi-residential that has essentially no landscaping on a per capita, certainly relative to a single family home. And these homes are all built with modern standards. So there's no legacy 5-gallon toilets and low efficiency washing machines and dishwashers. So that issue has been captured early on in this process.
And Ben, if I could add, this slide is really just an example. It's not meant to telegraph a particular roadmap that the board is going to be following. It's just demonstrating, while it does contain the various projects that we've been talking about, it's just an example of the flexibility that our sort of adaptive management to water resources brings for us.
Hey, Matt, I have a quick statement too.
Yep, go for it.
I'm currently in Cape Town, South Africa, which is a city of 4.7 million, experiencing routine power shutoffs, hours per day with no power. And it's a perfect example of what happens when you don't plan ahead. And the results are obvious. They're modifying them because the G20 is here. They're reducing the hours. But it's interesting that they've chosen that approach to adapt their power supply to the power demand.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you all for your service on this essential utility that we have in Marin. I'm reminded being here tonight that it was 25 years ago that I sat on the Blue Ribbon Committee that set in place Measure V. And Measure V is really what has driven the opportunities for this water district to increase its conservation and use operational improvements to keep the system working as best it can. You know, Mr. Sellier said that this was just a milestone, not a destination, and that's certainly true. And many of you agreed with that, but I would say it's a very significant milestone. The actions you're taking tonight really are the next generation of focus, and there will always be a need to be looking beyond tomorrow as it relates to reliability of water supply. But the actions you're taking tonight really address the goal that you set. You've achieved that goal, likely exceeded that goal, and you've done it within the budget that you put together for financing under your current rates. That is a double win. And if you were a sports team, somebody would be going to Disneyland. Okay? So I'm here to ask for one other revision, one really important revision. You've heard about it for actually the last 2 years, if not longer, at every meeting. And there's differences of opinion. But from my perspective, where the staff recommendation states to continue to investigate the feasibility of increased local storage, I think that's fine. There's spillways, there's Kent Dam, but I would add outside of the Walker Creek watershed. There's a lot of reasons to do that. Most importantly, it would be the respect that you said for the diversity of this community, the long-standing concerns of those who have spent the last several years with thoughts that their homes, their businesses, and their way of life were at risk. And I think tonight is an opportunity that you can reliably expand our supply and our reliability on it, and do that in a way that shows respect to that community. It also strengthens your commitment to environmental restoration by working in that partnership with Caltrout, University of California, many others in the Walker Creek watershed. So you'd be strengthening your position there. You'd be avoiding an EIR, which, as far as I'm concerned, is going to bring out all the other voices that live in our community that have always lived here around environmental issues that you haven't heard from in this debate. And so finally, you have the opportunity to do this. Ben said you can't bind a future board, but for as long as you're sitting at that end of the room, you can agree you're not going to spend any more money on these items. Please take Walker Creek watershed out of the future studies. Thank you.
Thank you. Iris Starr, and then we'll move on to Zoom, the Zoom attendees, 1402 and Ed Jameson.
Hi, I'm Iris Starr. I want to thank you for what you just said, Steve, and put a double exclamation point on it. I want to thank staff for this piece of information. It's the most useful thing that I've seen coming out yet, and I'm, happy that we're coming to the end of a process, at least at this milestone, that has taken 2 years, which is a very long time in my political and consulting career, government career. I want to echo what people in this room have said and have talked to you about, which is that focusing on the PETA 3 option is great. I'm totally in support of that. I think I'm hearing everyone in the room supporting that. But I do want to focus what we spend our money on. And it should be that alternative, and then possibly the alternative to the alternative that the director just spoke about on the slide. It looks to me on this chart that the two clear losers that should be taken off the dais is the desal plant, which is costly, and I don't know what the inequity it talks about, but I can guess there's an inequity problem, and that will cause plenty of issues for the board and the community to deal with that. And then the Sulahule, which is going to be taking private land. Those just need to be taken off, and then we continue with our focus. And if those just need to be set aside, let's reassure the community that we are in lockstep with the goals of getting the acre feet that you have set out, and that can be achieved with the PETA alternative. And I do want to urge all of you not to kick the can down the road. That's the worst possible thing that can happen in this kind of with these kind of projects, because they are multi-million, million dollar projects. And so if the idea is that you'll charge ahead on PETA and then at the same time keep scooping these other guys along, that's really not going to get us to where we want to go in any kind of time frame that we're talking about seeing. So do I have anything else? No, I thank you for your work. And I want to just agree that I did try to look up some of the prior work and reports that you had done. And it was pretty clear there was no home base for the information on it. I think after 2 years of working on this project, there should absolutely be something like that.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, 1402 Ed Jameson, and then Marilyn Price. Mr. 1402.
James Holmes, Larkspur. First, I think we need to know more about the assumptions underlying the drastic reduction in proposed extra water supply from 8,500 to 6,500 acre feet. Does that assumption, for example, contemplate no landscape watering? Secondly, I'm concerned that by setting aside the Suluhuli local storage option, the board, which the staff called eminently constructible, the board may be weighing far too heavily the interests of a small group of impacted adjacent landowners who represent but a minuscule fraction of the total number of ratepayers whose interests should be the board's primary concern and focus. And third, and most importantly, I'm concerned that the conveyance alternative rests on the weak read of public contracting with other agencies. The world's best pipeline is of little avail if we're at the mercy of someone else who can decide whether to fill it and at what cost. Dependence on public contracting with other agencies carries risks regarding both price and availability, which don't seem to be included in the evaluation matrix or considered in the discussion. Public agency contracts are arrangements of convenience that can be politically influenced. Specifically, the conveyance proposal exposes the district and its customers to potential extortion. Please recall what happened the last time the district proposed a pipeline to bring water from elsewhere, the East Bay during the last drought. Entities all along the way promptly piled on with their demands. Can you be sure that won't happen again? The district should not be put in the position of the hapless character in the play A Streetcar Named Desire, Blanche Dubois, who lamented how she'd always depended on the kindness of strangers. The district's drought plans should not depend on the kindness of strangers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. James,
let me-
sorry, hold on.
I just wanted to speak to one point, and we did talk about it, but it does feel quite important for the public to understand and appreciate. But we're saying our goal of supplemental supply has gone from 8,500 to 6,500 because of conservation. All along, from the very beginning, we recognized that conservation was part of the water supply portfolio. So this is really in line with our entire planning efforts from the get-go. Somewhat surprising for us how much the community has done in the intervening time, bringing the demand down, such that at this point, far sooner than we thought would occur, we're able to recognize that of the current 4,000 delta, meaning we are currently 4,000 acre feet on an annual basis below what we were projecting when we started this effort. So again, to stick with the conservatism that's important in water supply planning, certainly, we worked with the board to identify 50%, only half of that reduced demand, and incorporated it into our overall kind of current assessment. So yes, it's shifting a bit the goal down in terms of supplemental supply, but it's really, as we consider conservation as part of the water supply portfolio, it's just showing how we're meeting the goal with, fortunately, and really allowing us to be economical and thoughtful of taking advantage of conservatively half of that amount. So there's no assumptions that went into it. It's just using actual hard data, that we monitor routinely, of course, the demand on our system over the last few years.
Thank you. Ed Jameson, Marilyn Price, and then Trush Derry. Go ahead, Mr. Jameson.
Thank you. This was another typically eloquent presentation by Mr. Sellier, but I believe the proposed 6,500 acre feet of new supply is nowhere near what we need. We need to plan for 8,000 to 10,000 acre feet per year of near-term conveyance, not 3,800 acre feet per year. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Marilyn Price.
Yeah, well, thank you again for, for definitely considering more than I saw when I first started joining conservation as an important priority to lower the amount of water that we use. I have been concerned, and I entered the water issue not just because of water, but because of consumption of everything. I've mentioned this before in our developed world. I kind of get upset when people are blaming the water board, PG&E, the oil companies, when definitely all these bodies are part of the issue, but it's also the consumer and reaching the consumer who is also at fault, to me, for the environmental position we're in. Many of us have known for years, you know, what can happen, and it looks more dire now today than ever before. So I just want to thank you. I'd love water to be like a primary issue here in Marin that we can use to teach people not just to conserve water and why, but why we all need to live, as I've said before, within our limits and conserve everything. I look at, I know our water use here in my family, and I mentioned this when I first started. We're a family of 4, the 3 upstairs, a young teenager. My daughter and son-in-law are not ardent conservationists like me, but we still use only 18 gallons a day per person, and we do have an outdoor yard. So I know a lot more can be done by everybody, and I'm looking to you to continue to support conservation and do what you can with experts available to reach out to our residents to motivate them to conserve on all kinds of levels. We need to do this for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Trish Derry, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Kathy Tresh here. Good evening, and thank you for your presentations and all the work that you've done. Tonight, I was really hopeful that this board would eliminate the Hicks Valley Suluhuli expansion from the current list of alternative projects. I'll shorten my speech because Annie, Maria, and Sally already made a lot of the points that I would have. And I agree with the gentleman that talked about not doing anything in the Walker Creek watershed, how important and integral that watershed is. I favor the preservation of the existing farms and the stewardship of the farmers on the riparian, grassland, and woodland habitat on those lands. I am also in support of the hard work that these farmers do to care for their land, including the fact that they are providing food for us. On one of the slides, it talked about the loss of structures, and I think those should really be defined as homes and barns. They're people's homes. I rode my bike out last Sunday from my farm in Two Rock to see the existing reservoir for the first time. I'd never been there before, although I've ridden Marshall Petaluma Road a lot of times. So, and I also noted, in addition to the impacts to those farms, that there would be impacts to current recreation, as I saw the trails along the eastern edge of the dam that are used by hikers and fishermen, and they would all be inundated with any raising of the water levels. I support the PETA 3 pipeline conveyance alternative and appreciate your water efficiency and conservation efforts. That's really all I have to say, but I noticed in one of your previous presentations that you were talking about the permitting agencies that would be involved in any expansions, and I didn't see any mention of the Bureau of Reclamation. And I was curious as to why they would not be involved along with the Army Corps of Engineers on any dam projects. And Director Russell would probably know that. So, all right, thank you very much. And please do remove Suluhuli from consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. And we have Sam. Go ahead, Sam.
Good evening. Good evening, Board of Directors. Sam, I have just a couple quick things. Support the PETA 3 proposal as presented. Appreciate greatly the staff and the board members that did come out to these farms and these ranches that saw that, yes, people are living in the houses and buildings that would be inundated, had a chance to get a feel for the culture and the agriculture on the ground and see the cows that are there and the businesses that are there and the nature that accompanies productive agricultural operations, and has an understanding that, yes, there's importance there. Yes, those houses and buildings are being used. And yes, there are long-term family traditions on the lands that would be proposed to be inundated should Suluhule be expanded. I just want to echo Steve Kinsey's thoughts and ideas that let's just take Walker Creek off the table once and for all. And encourage, especially when we're thinking long-term, I know it would be a big lift, but in the 76-77 drought, we found the solution on the other side of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. There's great expansion going on with Sites Reservoir. Los Vaqueros came close but was not expanded. Is it time for Marin to become a long-term partner with much more reliable sources of water in the municipal water districts that are neighbors to the east? I am remembering long ago a priest at Mass in Novato, when he moved to Novato or to Marin County, he just said he found that Marin was an island with the bay on one side, the ocean on the other, and eggs in Sonoma County to the north. Let's just keep the fact that we're an island in mind, and we're always going to be dependent on outside sources for water, and think long-term in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Thank you for that. And thank you for all the public who attended tonight and commented. Your comments were appreciated and noted. With that, I'd like to go ahead and entertain a motion based on the staff recommendation as written in the agenda.
I would like to make a motion to move forward with the recommendation with the addition that the future investigation of storage focuses or prioritizes the non-Suluhule options. Kent Dam and reservoir spillway raises on the Kent and Suluhule, but not the Suluhule expansion.
Forever.
During your term.
I don't know if we, during our term, I'm not sure that we can do it.
Molly, is there?
If I could, I
Sorry,
think the
Ben.
word prioritize is interesting in context of where we are at this point, but.
I could try to propose some language at the end of subsection 3. So we could add prioritizing evaluation of spillway modifications and Kent Lake reservoir or feasibility of Kent Lake.
Yeah, that's a little clearer than what I said, but that was the intent.
I'm going to repeat that because I think I got, it might not have been clear. So I'll just say adding at the end of for additional water supply, prioritizing evaluation of spillway modifications and Kent Lake Reservoir.
So, yeah, I'll make the motion then.
Second. Okay. Terry, roll call.
Vice President Smith. Director Kush.
Aye.
Director Mayer.
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
And President Sampson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next item, future board member or future board meetings.
Okay, please bear with me. There are a lot of meetings coming up. Internal meetings. So our finance committee meeting and only our finance committee meeting is this Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Key items, SAP update and budget kickoff. Next week, we'll have our regular Board of Directors meeting with the closed session beginning at 5 p.m. Let's see, March 18th, the regular board meeting with the possible key item of connection fee. I believe there's also a closed session that evening as well. Thursday, March 20th, the Watershed Committee meeting / special meeting will take place. One of the key items is Azalea Hill. Actually, roads and trails will not be presented that day, but we will also bring the watershed facility review for that Watershed Committee meeting.
Great.
Then in terms of external meetings, Friday, March 7th is the North Bay Watershed Association. March 19th is the Tamales Bay Foundation meeting, and Friday, March 21st is the Lagunitas TAC meeting. Any questions?
Yeah, the wildfire working group meetings, I believe those are in March as well.
Oh, yeah, those are at the end. I put that in the next upcoming
Understood.
meetings.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.